Let's stay with all things debate now. We're joined by Anand Ahuja. He is with Indian Americans for Trump. We are also joined by Democratic strategist Spencer Critchley. He is former communications advisor for Barack Obama's campaign. Spencer, let me come to you first. A very civil debate, as we've been hearing, somewhat drab, you might say, in a good way. There was no name calling. Many were sure that Tim Walz would at least call J.D. Vance weird again. Only time we heard that word was when Vance himself used it, referring to climate change and gun control. What would you make of the mood of the debate?
Actually, I'm a little bit concerned about the cordiality that's being celebrated, not because I don't believe it, and I very much do, and I think it's very important to have a civil debate. And I understand why people are longing for a return to civil debate in our politics. The problem here, though, is that I think that Tim Walz served to legitimize J.D. Vance as a candidate by appearing to take his ideas seriously and attribute good motives to him when he was just lying repeatedly. And the key issue in this campaign wasn't even addressed until the last question, which is who won the last election, which stands for do you support elections, which stands for do you support democracy? So none of the relatively cordial discussion of policy differences is relevant if one of the candidates represents a ticket that has been conducting an attack on democracy for years now and advertising its intentions to continue that attack.
A very good perspective, different perspective there. Thanks, Spencer. Let me now head across to Anand. Anand, do you think that it was advantage Vance in last night's debate?
I personally believe that Tim Vance did very well, and basically he was more effective as compared to his adversary Tim Walz in conveying the message to the masses. And I believe that he conveyed Trump's policies very well in yesterday's debate. Uh, uh, it will definitely make a difference amongst undecided voters, especially those who still have not made their mind to support Donald Trump.
Right.
And I believe that J.D. Vance articulated Trump's policies very well yesterday, especially when he
All right.
made his statement.
Spencer, Anand, we have another guest.
Especially,
We have another
especially,
guest, Gregory Hartley. He's a body language expert joining us, also a former Army interrogator. Thanks, Greg, for joining us this morning. Greg, what did you make of how Vance and Walz did plenty of memes online of Vance furiously taking notes while that debate was going on?
I think those are different styles. Some people take notes, some don't. I don't read anything into that. What I will say is they were both very polite. Both of your guests have already said that. A certain amount of culture plays into that. Most body language and behavior has a cultural element. And there's a thing called Minnesota nice. And any person from Minnesota listening will know that means I don't necessarily mean what I'm saying. And there's contempt in their facial muscles to show that they had contempt for the ideas, if not the person. So I think they both showed a little bit of that in their body language. And as you walk through each of these things, you'll find a little.
So, what was it that stood out in terms of body language between the two of them?
Yeah, I think that right out of the gate, Walz was showing some body language that showed he was under stress. There are really only two parts to body language. One is the autonomic nervous system responding, and the other is what we're trying to project. He came in and you could see that he was jittery. His body language was moving oddly. His speech patterns were halting and then picking up. That's fight or flight, and that's adrenaline in your system forcing you to behave a certain way. As he became more comfortable, you saw him relax a lot more. And Vance, on the other hand, seemed to be more fluid in his delivery and in his approach and less fight or flight.
Spencer, I'm going to get you to pick up on that. Now, some reports saying that Walz had told Kamala Harris before she picked him as running mate that debates were really not his forte, his strong suit. He did not want to disappoint Harris, saying that she might have made the wrong choice, perhaps. Now, judging by what happened last night, do you think that Harris did make a wrong choice last night? Was a defining moment for Tim Walz and a somewhat lackluster performance? Would you agree?
Oh, no, not at all. And I think that the polling results match my impression, which was that it was roughly a draw, though I would give Vance the advantage on style. My shorthand version of it is that Vance won on style and Walz won on substance and honesty. And I thought Greg's comments on the visual elements of this were spot on. Very often the impact of nonverbal communication far outweighs verbal communication. It's very rare for people to be carefully tracking the content of a debate or really almost any communication. People form impressions based on perhaps one or two facts that are asserted, but far more it's an emotional impression largely based on nonverbal cues. And I think this is where J.D. Vance outperformed in the style category, because visually and in tone of voice and speech rhythms, all of that sounded very fluid and in terms of impressions, very convincing, although it was deeply dishonest all the way through. He was effectively presenting some version of Donald Trump's policies, but it was largely fictional, portraying Trump as somehow being a champion of the Affordable Care Act, which he tried repeatedly to destroy, for example. So as I say, Walz was more substantive and far more honest, but his somewhat nervous appearance, the note taking, occasionally he would look over at Vance and kind of reflexively nod when Vance made a point, which I think is a big mistake. I think reflecting that Walz is a far less polished performer in a debate, but his favorability spiked up. Vance's favorability went up as well. And Walz's favorability leaped among independent voters who are crucial. So we have to hope that there are enough voters who respond to what amounts to, I think, Walz's authenticity, if not his polish.
Okay, one of the most important portions of the debate, we alluded to that earlier, did Trump lose the 2020 election? Tim Walz asked J.D. Vance that pointed question. Vance's reply, I'm focused on the future. Many voters are worried that Trump will not concede if he wins. Anand, how do you feel about Vance's response last night? And more importantly, how worried should American voters be about that?
So basically, everything depends. If the election is fair and square, then I don't think any candidate should hesitate to concede. But if the election is stolen, and then it is expected from the person who actually has won the election to concede, I little bit find it very funny. And I don't understand why Trump is being blamed for that when in 2016, when he won the election, Hillary Clinton took the same position what Trump has taken now. And secondly,
except that she did not.
Trump was never ever accepted as president of this country by Democrats. There are two impeachments, there are Russian hoax, and all those one after the another investigation against Trump. And you tell me, at what point of time in those 4 years of Trump's presidency, Democrats accepted Trump as a president?
Throughout his presidency, Hillary Clinton conceded the election.
So Spencer, go ahead very quickly, 30 seconds.
I'm sorry, but this is just factually untrue, and it's easy for viewers to Google it and find the truth. Hillary Clinton formally conceded the election within 24 hours, and Democrats have always acknowledged that Donald Trump won that election fairly. The investigations of Donald Trump have been conducted by an independent Justice Department based on apparent and real crimes that he has committed. He's already been convicted of some of those crimes. So none of that was true.
Spencer, what about two impeachment? What about those two impeachment?
Illegal.
All right, gentlemen, just going to pause it there for a second. Okay, both sides heard well. Greg, I know you have to go, so just a few final thoughts from you. Spencer and Anna do stay on, but Greg, what suggestions would you have for both Vance and Walz if they have to do this again? I know another debate is not happening, but if this were to happen again. before November 5th.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to Vance is to answer the question first instead of the end. It gets more clear for people if they hear the answer right out of the gate rather than preamble and then at the end. For Walz, I would suggest he get some coaching around delivery, around presence in front of people, and try to short circuit that fight or flight. One secret for all of you listening is curl your toes in your shoes when you feel fight or flight, because it brings your thinking brain back online and it adapts without anyone having the ability to see what you're doing. So just remember to curl your toes in your shoes. Walz, that will work for you too.
All right, very quickly, all three of you, who amongst the three of you, raise your hands if you think that Vance won the debate. All right, so fortunately I can't see you right now, but we'll get that tally. So Spencer's the only one saying that that Vance did not win. So thanks for that. Greg, we're going to let you go at this point in time. Spencer and Anna do stay with us because we want to have a look at what was said about Iran, as we know that the conflict there in Iran continuing to be a huge issue for the Biden administration. Now, Anand, to you first, really. In the debate that happened, we had Vance talking about Iran, saying that Iran received over $100 billion and unfrozen assets thanks to Kamala Harris. Now, Harris's administration did not have anything to do with that because that was during the Obama administration. So why this misleading claim really from Vance on the debate stage with regards to Iran?
Correct me if I am wrong, but isn't it that Biden was vice president at that time and Biden was very much part of that deal? Isn't it that Biden is the one who negotiated that deal? Isn't it that the Obama administration was basically working at the advice of Biden at that time?
But we're
Isn't it
talking
that
about Kamala
Biden
Harris, though.
No, I can understand. Instead of using
Spencer, go ahead.
Kamala Harris name.
Yeah, why the question being, why did J.D. Vance say something that was untrue? J.D. Vance was saying something untrue every time he answered a question. The economic statistics he cited were false. The Affordable Care Act stuff was false. The positions on abortion he cited were 180-degree flips from positions that Trump had announced within recent weeks. So similarly with the Iran deal, as the moderators phrased the question, however one feels about that deal, it was a deal that forestalled the development of nuclear weapons by Iran for many years to come. As soon as Trump got in office, he went back on that deal, which in itself is a very damaging thing for an American president to do, to reverse a formal treaty with another country. And he did not replace it with any deal, let alone a better one. And so Iran went ahead with developing their capability to develop nuclear weapons. And now, instead of that being perhaps, well, certainly if they had violated the deal, it would have been many months, if not years off. And under the terms of the deal, it was at least a decade off. Now they're within a week or two of being able to develop nuclear capability, thanks to Donald Trump. And of course, in the Trump-Vance universe, this is somehow Kamala Harris's fault.
Can I respond to that?
All right, aside from last night's debate, let's just take I have a question for you, actually, Anand. Just aside from last night's debate, let's take a bigger picture look at even Trump here, as we've been doing, and Harris. Now, Trump has charged Biden and Harris with empowering Iran. Trump sees himself as someone who can fix things. However, Anand, when Trump was president, he withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, despite the opposition of some allies, souring those relations. So how will he be able to really fix this escalating crisis with Iran?
Okay, first of all, thanks to Trump's foreign policy, especially with respect to Iran, that there was no such wars, there was no Middle East conflict at that time. There was no Russia-Ukraine war during Trump's time. So Trump was very strong and very effective as far as the foreign relation is concerned, as far as maintaining peace in the world is concerned. Now, because of weak administration we have in the United States today, a very weak president, a very weak vice president, and we are witnessing this mess all over the world. Iran is strong today. And coming back to that Iran deal, isn't it that fact that the money that Obama gave, $1.7 billion that was given to Iran, Iran used that money in its terrorist activities? Isn't it the fact that these are the reports of secret agency in United States today that the war Iran is conducting
All
today
right.
all over the world is by using that money that Obama $1.7 billion released to Iran?
Spencer, Biden has steadfastly supported Israel in its war against Hamas, while really pleading for that ceasefire from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But Netanyahu has continued to resist that. There are fears that this is turning already into a regional conflict. Spencer, what are the options really for the Biden administration given this escalating situation, and we have an election just a few weeks ahead?
Yes, if I may, first about that talking point that there was supposedly no conflict during the Trump administration. That's a favorite Trump Republican talking point.
Sure.
Russia was actually active in the Donbass, and of course there was conflict in the Middle East, and there is no magical personal quality of Donald Trump as a person that somehow terrifies foreign leaders into not conducting military operations. In fact, it's well known, most of them see him as a patsy who's easily swayed by flattery or minor favors. In the situation in the Middle East that we're facing now, I think it's deeply concerning. Many people overestimate the leverage that the United States has over Israel and over the other parties. Of course, it's significant because of the aid that the United States delivers to Israel, but as Israel has demonstrated, it will often act independently despite the risk of cutbacks in that aid. The United States has enacted cutbacks in military and other forms of aid to Israel in the past to express displeasure with Israeli actions going back decades. And it's uncertain how much influence that ends up having over the choices made by Israeli leaders. That said, I think that it's absolutely critical for the United States not only to act, but to be seen to act to support, first of all, the fundamental values that a liberal democracy is supposed to stand for. So among those values is Israel's right to defend itself, especially seeing the kind of attacks we've been seeing recently and going back to October 7th, the horrendous attacks of October 7th. But at the same time, a liberal democracy faces a heavier burden of conducting defense in the most humane way possible and doing everything possible to avoid civilian damage and casualties.
Spencer Critchley and Anand Ahuja, thank you very much for your time this morning here on NDTV. Sorry we've run out of time. We'd definitely pick up this conversation at another point, maybe in the weeks ahead.